Hi, welcome to Life Expansion After 50. I'm currently doing a series on anti-aging, the kind of anti-aging that we can do from within. So about 10, 12 years ago, I came across some data that talked about all the benefits of sprinting. At the time, it was mainly mitochondria, but there were some ideas about human growth hormone, there's some ideas about testosterone, and at that time I started sprinting off and on. I would sprint for a few, 2-3 months at a time. It's demanding and it requires a lot of recovery, so it wasn't something I stuck with. I wasn't competing for anything, but I was looking for the health benefits. Fast forward, recently I was noticing this spike in supplement advertising. So many supplements are out there, and part of it is because the largest growing segment of the population are those people over 50. So it makes sense, especially when it comes to the anti-aging side. Not only that, you have technology advancing. At the same time, I was working on the neural pathways and understanding deep practice and neuroplasticity and how to start getting command of the powerful present moment, which has a lot to do with our neural pathways. Then the dots connected for me. And if you consider that we have 100 billion neurons, and those neurons are largely responsible for what we think of as physiological, but then when you make the next step and say that, well, 95% of what we do is done by habit, habit lives in the network of neurons, and habit is mostly associations, it's not thinking. If 95% is actually by habit, then, or most of what we think is thinking is actually associations coming from the nervous system. It's the neural pathways, the network of neurons. And that's really what the subconscious is. It's the network of neurons making the associations. It's so fast because it processes, basically it's energy going through from neuron to neuron across the synapses, which makes up the neural pathway. That helps explain why the processing of the subconscious is so fast. It's 11 million bits per second, whereas the conscious mind is only processes at about 50 bits per second. Bringing it all together, if the neural pathways are so involved with the present moment, and if it has a lot to do with our thinking and our habits, and 95% of what we do is done by habits, and we have about 33,000 stimulus response cycles in a day. And if you look it up, say how many decisions does the average human make in a day, that's really get to 33,000. But we're awake about 65,000 seconds a day, so that's essentially one every other second, a decision every other second, and then you start piecing it together and you say, well, it's really not decisions as in thinking, these are associations, stimulus response cycles. To take that to the next level and say, well, if the neurons do all of that, then what does it do for my health, is there anything else besides mitochondria? It turns out there is. It's mitochondria, it's BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, AMPK, and that has to do with the energy modulation and metabolism. And you have testosterone for men, estrogen for women after menopause. It reduces inflammation. NAD plus is another one of the benefits. Of course, the mitochondria, and I look at mitochondria, the non-technical term would be like they're like mini organs inside the cells. So if you think about life as how fractal it is, our cells have a lot of characteristics as we do as humans, and what's inside the cell would be like what's in our body as organs. There's something like close to 100 different types of mitochondria that are in the cells, and that improves with sprinting. Then what I started looking at was, what is it about sprinting that creates all of this? And sure enough, there are parallels between that and deep practice. Deep practice is more associated with neuroplasticity. And you can read about it in A Grit by Angela Duckworth, Talent Code by Daniel Coyle. And deep practice describes the struggle on the edge of ability. You want to have it small and segmented, really defined, and you're pursuing essentially perfection in a very short scope with a lot of intensity. So 5 minutes of deep practice will tire you out. Well, there's some other factors that are associated with sprinting. There's 7 of them: novelty, intention, precision, balance, progression, explosiveness, and struggle at the edge of ability. And that's how I came up with the footwork exercises, because I noticed that there were some footwork exercises that randomly would say that yes, these type of drills will help these different things, and some of them were on that list. The big one I left off was neurotransmitter production. And in that neurotransmitter production, we have dopamine, which is the habit formation structure, the serotonin, which is the feel good. We have acetylcholine, which is the neural pathway signal to the muscle junction. And we have glutamate, which is the central nervous system signal to the neural pathway. In the neuroplasticity, you learn about synaptogenesis, which is essentially like pruning the unused neural pathways. So as a neural pathway is inactive, the synapse moves to the active neural pathways. That process is called synaptogenesis. Think of it as the brain wants to be efficient. It's not going to create excess neurotransmitter more than it needs. And with 100 billion neurons, that's a lot of neural pathways that it would be maintaining if they were all going on. So the short version on this is that you have neurons. You may have heard of myelin. Again, you can look that up, myelin. Myelin is a sheet that wraps around the neuron itself. It results in the neuron firing faster, stronger, with more accuracy. So the more accurate and precise you can get the neuron to fire from one to the other across the synapse, that's going to lead to like the perfect free throw, for example. And if you were to look at the neurons of these great three-point shooters in the NBA and WNBA, my guess is you would find a lot of myelin on their neurons. Now what happens is, when they stop practicing, if they stop playing basketball, the neurons continue to be wrapped with myelin, but the synapse goes away. This is very, very important because it accounts for why when you come back into a sport at the beginning of a season, you may feel a little awkward, you may stumble weird, it's just your balance is off, timing is off, but that only lasts for a day or two. That's because the synapse is moving back into that neural pathway to activate it. And that's the big deal about the footwork drills. So that's why the novelty, intention, precision and balance, progression, explosiveness, and struggle at the edge of ability, this communicates to the central nervous system that more is coming. So there's two more concepts, and then I'll get into the drills. One is homeostasis. So the body's always trying to get to a place of stability. It wants to stabilize. If you lift weights or go to the gym regularly, you'll experience this in the plateaus. Those plateaus that we hit, I used to think of them as just a pain and it's an aggravation, but what it is the body getting stable. So what we can do is use those to our advantage. I think of it like this. We have a set of neurons that respond to the novelty, intention, progressive, etc., and they spike the neural pathway activation. And then it kind of normalizes, and that's where we stabilize. And other neural pathways come in that are like leverage. And this is the stuff that you do every single day. Those neural pathways, you do that without effort. If you do it every day, it's without effort. And that's that leverage that I'm describing. But there's something else. That was homeostasis, is this leveling off. There's also allostasis. And these are both similar because homeostasis is not just looking at the current, it's looking at what it expects in the future. And if your demands were less today than they were yesterday, you can see this decline line, and that decline line can start easily in the 40s. So when it comes to exercise, you may have noticed in the 40s that you need more recovery time. In the 50s, you start to lose a little bit of speed, you lose a little flexibility, and you lose agility. In the 60s, we start to lose strength and need a lot more recovery. And it gets to the point where you can't work out enough to carry your gains to the next recovery period. It's like a losing battle. And then in the 70s, we lose mobility. Well, it turns out that this homeostasis, this stabilizing, because the body's being efficient, that decline line can easily start into the 40s, and it just takes a nice slow decline down to say 75, 80. But with the right exercises and the right approach, we can extend that line. I say right now there's plenty of data that says you can extend it out past 70, 75. I say that using it this way from the bottom up or from the inside out, using it with the footwork drills to drive more neurotransmitter, I can get it to go past 90 before it declines. So that's my story. That's what I'll be doing for the next 25 years. That process of allostasis is looking forward the same way homeostasis does. It looks forward and sees if there's more demand. So if you do that, here's a couple of little exercises you can do. Let's say you can do 20 push-ups. I would say that means you could probably do 5 very easily. So just do 5 push-ups today, and then tomorrow add 1 push-up, just 1 push-up, and then the next day add 1 push-up. And so when you get to 10, we go back to 5, but do something different. Put your feet up on a chair, or maybe if you started with half push-ups or like assisted push-ups, start to remove the assist. You can maybe do it on 1 foot, like put your 1 foot on the other, the toe to heel, and then get to 10, and then go back to 5. Ideally, what I would, and it's on my page, Life Expansion After 50, what I would like to see is have you do a band, like a resistance band, and wrap it around your torso or your shoulders, and just add a slight resistance. Go back 5, and then 6, 7, and go back to 10, and then do it again with a little bit more resistance. Sometimes you could double up the bands, sometimes you could choke up on it. But what we're doing is communicating to our central nervous system that more demands are coming, more demands are coming, more demands are coming, and then the central nervous system creates more neurotransmitter. And it's the ones I'm really interested in is the serotonin, feel good, right? That's the kind of logical. Dopamine, to create the right habits so I do the things I'm supposed to be doing. And then, of course, the glutamate, so that my signal is strong enough, and my acetylcholine, so that the transmission of the signal to the muscle junction is strong enough. So it turns out when I look at this, a lot of what we lost in our 40s and 50s and 60s was not necessarily muscle. It's the signal, the neurotransmitter signal is weak. So if I were to look at a muscle atrophy curve, I would have thought that if, let's say, a person gets a cast, I would say that the muscle atrophy begins here and has a steep decline. But what I look at now is there is some muscle decline, but the most of the decline, at least after 50, what we're seeing is from the neural pathways. They're deactivating, and that drops really quickly. But the nice thing is it can come back quickly. We can get it back within a day or two. We can have those neural pathways activating, and then with these exercises that I'm doing, we strengthen it. So Life Expansion After 50 is my podcast, and I keep track of this. I'm documenting this 2-month exercise I'm doing to work on daily on generating more neurotransmitter to see what differences. Already I can see there's a lack of inflammation. I can see my agility is much better. In the airport, I don't carry a rollerboard anymore. I carry my bag on my shoulder. I used to think it doesn't make any sense because any gains I get from walking around with the thing on my shoulder, it's not like I'm gonna do that every day, so it's not gonna help me with exercise-wise, but it does because it puts a demand on my body. What I want to do is every day put some kind of a new demand on my body: novelty, intention, precision, balance, progression, explosiveness, and struggle at the edge of ability. So if I'm carrying that bag on my shoulder at the airport and I take the stairs instead of the escalator, I'm putting a demand. The body doesn't know what's going on, it just knows that there's more demand. I wear a weighted vest. I recently started running uphill for short spurts with the weighted vest on. I'm putting a demand, and when I wear that weighted vest, I stand tall. I don't let myself slouch or walk weakly. I stand up. So I'm putting demand, constantly putting a demand. Some of this I learned in ranger training or training with SEALs. A lot of this goes back to it, but I didn't know, and we didn't have the information at the time. Same with the martial arts. A lot of this is 100% consistent with what we've done with martial arts, but we didn't have the brain scanning tools explaining why it works. So what I'm doing today, I'll have the cones set up on this basketball court, regulation basketball court, and you'll see I've set them up at the specific corners. And the drill I'm doing today is a combination speed and side shuffle drill, and it's more about getting the movement right. So I'll actually time it 2 different ways. I'll time it the right way, and then I'll do a cheat way just so you can see there's about 1.5 seconds probably. I haven't done it on this size run, but I know that there's about a second to 1.5 seconds difference when you cheat, and I'll explain that when I get to it. So there you go, Life Expansion After 50. What I invite you to do is this can work for anywhere in the world. If you can find a basketball court, or just get the dimensions for a basketball court to set the cones up the same way, and then we can do these experiments. I will do another one. I'll introduce another drill next week. So the other thing I'll do today is cover the emotional area of the 7 fitness areas. 7 fitness areas is my framework to help people move through the process of transformation when they want to transform their lives. And today's the emotional area, then I'll cycle back. So there's mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, relationship, professional, financial. I mainly focus on the first 4 because that's what we can control. The next time I go live, I will introduce another drill. So today I'm doing a running and a shuttle drill, and then next time I'll do just shuttle runs, like 10 yards, 8 to 10 yards, and then pick up a cone and move it 8 to 10 yards, pick up a cone. And I'll start timing these, and I'll put the timing in the post on Facebook And then what you'll be able to do is time yourself, and we can compare notes. I'm 70, so you have a benchmark. I've been doing this for 6 weeks now. I don't have any training in track and field or anything like that. So here's the warm-up. I haven't done any warm-up yet. I just arrived and set up. So I start off slow. These things are one of my foot. I take my foot, and that's the distance between each one. And I'll show you why that's important in a moment, just because from progression from week to week. So I start off slow. That was pretty slow. Then I pick up the pace. When I first started this, I couldn't really get my feet in between. I was too sloppy. So that's some of the precision. And then the next step, you can't really tell, but I'm pushing off from that outside foot. So here I'm just coasting along. Here I step off. So I'm starting to put in the explosiveness just a little bit with bounding. So if you want to get more in the explosiveness, just look up bounding. A lot of these drills I just get online. I go to YouTube and I look for sprinting drills, speed drills for sprinting, agility drills for soccer. There's a ton of them out there. And then I started picking ones that I liked. Now, the reason I put this cone here is because I do add an explosiveness element. So this warm-up drill covers everything. So what I'll do is I'll step from here and push off to skip a space. And then I'll step off from here and skip a space. And it does change by surface. Like if I'm on grass, it's harder to skip that space. I put the cone there so that I'm putting my foot in the same space, in the same spot every time. And it's about half the distance of the space. So again, I just use my foot, and that'll come into play in a few minutes. Now, I'm gonna go a little further. I'll go here. You see, I'm almost at that third space. So the warm-up drill, as I said, gets me a little bit of everything. And this one is really just getting it all together. The reason I move the spaces apart is because I can't work on speed with the spaces so close. And what I'm doing is just getting forward and backwards, forward and backwards. Forward and backwards, forward and backwards. And then from there, we'll do a little crossover. And a little side shuffle. If that's the only drill I was doing, I'd move them a little bit closer, more like a foot length and 1/2. All right, now we get into the work. So this one, this is a basic four cone drill. Side shuffle, back, side shuffle, forward. But what I have it set up for is my variation. It's a drill that I like to do. I won't do too much because I want to save what I have for the big drill. So you go back, forward, back, forward. And you see I'm just going diagonal. So it's a lot of back work. Now, the reason for the 7 factors: novelty, intention, precision, balance, progression, explosiveness, and struggle on the edge of ability. I may have left that one off before. So the whole struggle on the edge of ability is part of deep practice. And the elements of deep practice communicate to the central nervous system that this is important. And this to me is the big breakthrough. What I'm doing with the footwork drills is tapping into the allostasis part of it to tell my body that more is coming, and I'm essentially building the habit of my central nervous system building more neurotransmitter than I need. And again, don't get your running training from me, but I'll just tell you what I was doing. You can look these up and get the proper structure. But the A skip, and these are often used as warm-up exercises for sprinting. The difference between the A skip and the B skip is the B skip, I'm getting my heel back, like trying to kick myself in the butt. And that's because in sprinting, we want that circular motion. We don't want to put our foot too far out here. You get up to top speed and you're basically stopping yourself. And then the C skip is here and then opening up your hips. Helps with the hip flexors. I'll do an orientation and I'll time myself on the orientation as well. And then I'll do 4 reps. So the whole thing is a rep. And then while I'm recovering on the reps, I'll do the emotional part, the emotional area of the 7 fitness areas. 7 fitness areas, it's mental, physical, spiritual. Think about it as mind, body, soul, or mind, body, spirit. It's not the external spiritual realm, but the internal, our higher self, mind, body, soul. Emotional is in the middle. Emotion is the gateway to the right side because we can get triggered. We can do everything right over here. By the way, the mental, physical, spiritual is within our control. We control that. Our agency and personal leadership lives there. The emotional area is also ours, but it's so easily hijacked, so easily triggered, and a lot of our beliefs come from childhood, 0 to 7. We weren't even participating in it and forming those beliefs, and as a result, we can get triggered for reasons we don't even know. We have limiting beliefs for reasons we don't even know. So the emotional area, while it is in our control, people can find your buttons and push them. So we work on the emotional area. That's a big one. And then what I do is I do laps around mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional with people towards their quest. And their quest is either relationship, professional, financial. So think health, wealth, happiness, health, wealth, love, health, wealth, relationships. However you want to spell it, that's over here on the right side with relationship, professional, and financial. So here we go. Test 1. So I run forward, I side shuffle, and I go behind the cone. So I go past the cone, side shuffle, behind the cone, past the cone, side shuffle, behind the cone. And I stop the timer. So about 19 seconds. So I imagine, based on past work and stuff, I imagine my target is going to be somewhere around 14 seconds to complete this. So this will be a little faster. Still warming up though. It's orientation. Again, I don't want to get hurt. And so I do a lot of things I've learned the hard way. Sprinting is such a violent activity. You can get hurt more ways than you can imagine. And the injuries come out of nowhere. You're not even doing anything other than running, but because you're at the edge of your ability, that's why it happens. Here we go. So this actually helps with everything. I'm getting a little bit of precision because I'm going around the cones. I'm getting a little bit of explosiveness because I have to accelerate. And I'm also getting explosiveness because I have to stop. So I really misjudged that. I said 14 would be my target. That was 15:28. And so again, this gives us, I don't care where you are in the world, you have access probably to some basketball courts. If not, just get the measurement and measure out, make your own course using chalk or stones or whatever. I've done stones, you could use sticks. All right, now what I want to do now So I covered that. The takeaway is 7 factors. It leads to the central nervous system seeing that there's more demand coming. When it sees that more demand is coming, it creates more neurotransmitter. And when you have more neurotransmitter, you get benefits like human growth hormone, testosterone, estrogen for women after menopause, and anti-inflammation. I tell you, the inflammation went way down. So I do some neat D stuff, right? And sometimes if I'm adding weight or tension, I'll feel some inflammation in my knees. Sometimes when people try to get up from a chair, they feel a little bit of inflammation in their knees. Their knees hurt and they think that there's some injury going on. You get rid of the inflammation, the pain goes away. The emotional area is the gateway. And most of us, if I say emotion, we know what that looks like. We know what positive emotion looks like. We know what negative emotion looks like. The thing that people don't recognize is that emotion is energy in motion. And what makes it really confusing is that our thought, our base level of thought is energy, and what goes through our neurons is energy. This is why it's so easy for people to think that the associations coming from their neurons, which is habit, to think that that's their thinking. So you get an impulse from your neurons, your neural pathways, and that's from associations, usually from the past, and it feels just like a thought. And then it's called the subconscious mind in a lot of circles. I won't call it a mind because the mind is so much more powerful, so much more capable. It's not faster, but it's definitely more capable because the mind can think. The subconscious can just use associations. It's sort of like in AI. One is associations, is connecting things, words that have always been used, it knows what the meanings are, but it can't put together complex topics. It can't design out into the field of infinite possibilities, at least not effectively and with relevancy. And that's what the mind can do. But if you think of emotion as energy in motion, you can see why people can get triggered. And then here's the big problem. People then harbor or dwell upon whatever caused the pain, and now their emotion is lodged in to their neural pathways, which means it can be brought up. So you may have been walking around, everything's fine, and you see a picture, hear some music, there's a smell, maybe somebody says something, and bam, you're triggered into this spiral, right? Because of how it's been connected. And the neural pathways, 100 billion neurons, each neuron is connected with anywhere from 1,000 to 10,000 other neurons. And these connections, some of them get very deep. So if you ever watch a person with a phobia, you can see how they get so erratic or so intense. And that's from a memory. And for the people I've worked with who had a phobia that we removed, almost all the time it started somewhere like 2, 3, 4 years old. Now, let me just do another run and then I'll come back and get into the next part, which is explaining how we modulate the emotion or why it's important to modulate the emotion. Oh man, that wasn't much better. 14.15. So maybe I wasn't far off thinking it should be 14. Now I could speed it up if I run the cross sections, but the drill is to do side shuffle. The reason why this is so important is because people learn to believe that the emotional spirals are beyond their control. They worry about getting triggered at an inopportune time. So they pass up promotions, they pass up opportunities because they just don't trust themselves. So that's emotional impact about the future. We have to get past that so that we step into this and realize that all we can do is all we can do, but all we can do is enough. And we always have enough to get ourselves out of situations we got ourselves into. That's just the way it is. And we know that on the easy stuff. Then you have emotions of the present. And here's where we get triggered. And then we're out of control with it. And we get off track. Somebody throws us. And even that's a concern because we know that we've been triggered and we know we've lost it. And now we're worried about it. Because the typical thing is to try to suppress the emotion, which doesn't work. And when you suppress it, you're also creating another problem, because when you suppress the negative emotions, you're building the habit of suppressing emotions, and you inadvertently suppress positive emotions, because the subconscious doesn't care. It just does what it's trained to do. And remember, you're not dealing with a mind, you're dealing with a network of neurons. And so if you train the network of neurons to suppress emotions, it's going to suppress the positive emotions as well as the negative ones. And then we have the past. So here's all the bad things that happened to us. And everybody has something that happened bad for them. If it happened at the right time and the right age and from the right person and the right people around them, this could be something that they struggle with their entire life. So we have the past. We've got to reconcile the emotions of the past. We have to learn how to modulate the emotions in the present so they don't cause any spirals or cause loss of agency and personal leadership. And then we have to put in perspective the future. Now, how do you modulate emotions? That'll be the next step. Man, 14:11. So I'm probably not going to get much faster than that with the side shuffle. I can already feel a little pressure on the hamstring, so probably not going to get much faster than that. But it does give me a nice baseline, and I did 2 of them in that same range, going all out. What I'm going to do next time is I'm going to do the cheat one, which is run across. So I'm going to run across, and that'll speed that up by about 2 seconds. And that way you have 2 baselines. You have the shuffle one and you have the other one. I've tried it with stepping over forward or stepping over back, and it doesn't really work just because of the way your momentum is going. But the making the turn and running definitely does work. All right, now the modulation of emotions. So what's going on is emotions were never meant to be dwelled upon or harbored. They were meant to pass through. Joan Rosenberg, in a book, 90 Seconds to a Life You Love, the emotions just run through 90 seconds. It's a crest. And if you've ever been in an emotional situation, you may recall how you felt like it was going to be out of control. And this crest seems even scary. And that's where people start suppressing it. But here's the problem. The emotion is there to tell us something. And if you're suppressing it, its job is to keep you alive. So it's telling you it's going to work harder to tell you, and if you keep suppressing it, it's going to work harder. This is why you feel like you can never ever win against the emotions, which is why we feel like we're out of control. Once you learn to let them roll, it just goes over the crest. I didn't understand it before, but I've demonstrated. I would tell people, like in workshops or what have you, put your 2 hands together like this, and on the count of 3, I want you to push as hard as you can with your right hand. And when I first started doing this back in the 80s, it would be 100% of the room would be like this. Now I see more people do that, but it's still large percentages will do this. Push as hard as you can with your right hand on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. That's it. Because I never said push with the left. But when you do this, look, I can't even push anymore. So just let it roll. That's why people say just step aside and let them do their thing. And it goes over there as far as it can go. It runs out of energy and there's no strength over here. And then you can redirect and what have you. Very, very, very similar. And so we don't want to suppress the emotions, because that would be like pushing back with the left hand. Just let the emotion ride. It's going to roll through its crest. Right here, it feels like it's all powerful. Over here, it's got nothing. What we do is allow the emotion to pass through. And the way we're going to do that, and you can do this exercise with past emotions. I would say start small. Start with some little things, like you're late for a meeting. Something small that's not intense. Acknowledge it. You're going to first acknowledge and recognize that the emotion is there. Notice where it is in your body. So, right, emotions, especially if these are recurring emotions, they are in different parts of our body typically. And you notice where it is. That's called, you're going to locate the emotion. Then the next step we want to do is label it. So we're going to locate it, and then we're going to label it. And Joan Rosenberg says that of all the negative emotions, there's really only 8. They all can be categorized into just 8. But because we don't do this categorization, we tend to make them all just anxiety. So now this anxiety comes from, it doesn't matter if it's frustration or anger, or if it's embarrassment or vulnerability or sadness or shame or disappointment, helplessness, it doesn't matter. It's all anxiety. And this just contributes to our susceptibility to the dreaded anxiety spiral. So when you learn to do this, You won't be fearful of the anxiety spiral because it won't happen. And you'll have confidence that you can face anything because you recognize that the emotion was a physiological occurrence. When we stick with that emotion for so long, it becomes a feeling. Once it becomes a feeling, it's more like a neurobiological event. And that neurobiological event does create problems, right? Because now you have the cortisol, the adrenaline, and sometimes you get these adrenaline spikes. It could take hours before it subsides. So the 8 emotions, we're going to label it with one of these 8. Helplessness, disappointment, embarrassment, vulnerability, anger, frustration, sadness, or shame. Now, just listening to those, right? Sadness, shame, disappointment, helplessness, frustration, anger, embarrassment, vulnerability. Each one of those has a different action afterwards. So the benefit of locating it is just to put yourself at peace. The benefit of labeling it is now we can have an action of what we can do, and then the next one is learn from it. What is it there to teach me? I had the emotion, what is it there to teach me? And you learn not to do that thing again. So it's locate, label, learn. It helps if you do some breathing. When I did the spiritual area, I talked about how breath is how we access into our spiritual area, the mind, body, soul, and how most of the Eastern arts and martial arts, and yoga, they all use the breath work because the breath work opens that door. Now we still have to go through the door. And the same thing with the emotional area. We can get ourselves to where it's modulating, but if you still want to dwell in it and you still want to ruminate over that stuff and kind of drudge up some more stuff to feel bad, because we do get addicted to those feelings, that's on you. But at least you'll be aware that you're making the choice to do that and it's not something that's happening to you from the outside. Let me try this, see if I can get a 13 handle. But I'm going to cheat on the 13 handle. I'm not going to side shuffle. I'm going to run. And I still have to do a little bit of side stepping. I got to do a crossover. So it's actually 2 different exercises, 2 different drills if you think about it. All right, here we go. Well, it's always against my better judgment when I do stuff like that because I did aggravate the hamstring pull. But at least now I have the time baseline. I can take it easy for 2 weeks, let this thing heal up. I probably won't sprint next Monday because I would like to give it a go middle of July and see if I could make that lower time. So to quick recap, emotion is energy in motion. It's in the middle of the 7 fitness series framework: mental, physical, spiritual, emotion, relationship, professional, financial. It's in the middle because on the left side of the framework, these are the things that you control. They're in your control. You have agency. Emotion is the gateway to the other side. We have to get through that. You can do everything right over here and get triggered. Trust is built on the stairways going up, but it can be lost as quickly as going out the window on the way down. So the emotion is important to maintain the agency through that emotion, because the relationship, professional, and financial are all involving somebody else. They may not be controlled totally by somebody else depending on where you are, and also how much agency and personal leadership you have, because the more personal leadership you have, the more opportunity you have and the more requisite variety you have to respond to whatever's coming your way, and you can move people that other people may not be able to move. That relationship, professional, financial. Now, financial, you say that's not controlled by somebody else, but it kind of is, because every seller needs a buyer. Even if you're trading, even if you're solely a financial trader, you still have buyers on the other side, and you still learn from other people. You still pick up ideas from other people. So there's still relationship that's involved. The way we're going to do it is learning to modulate it. So when the thing comes in, we want to take a nice deep breath. We want to recognize, so we acknowledge the emotion, then we're going to locate it, we're going to label it, and then we're going to learn from it. When I did the mental and physical area, I said we have a pre-stimulus, and over there is the stimulus response that we know about. But we have a pre-stimulus, and that pre-stimulus sets up our state of being. And the state of being is what's in between. So we're moving around the state of being all the time. When it comes to the stimulus response, we make something like 33,000 decisions a day. We're awake about 65,000 seconds a day. So that's roughly a decision every other second, which tells you it's probably not decisions, it's probably stimulus response cycles. So if we have 33,000 stimulus response cycles, those response cycles are involved in this state of being. So our response cycles are influencing our state of being. There's a mental state of being, right? And there's a physiological state of being. If I'm already down and defeated like this physiologically, and I'm frowning and I'm just breathing shallow, and I enter into a stimulus response cycle, that state of being has a lot to do with the outcome. If I'm alert mentally and I'm standing tall physically, my physiology is more of courage than fear, then I have the ability to deal with that. And in this pre-stimulus, you have beliefs, neuroplasticity, which is habits, priming, and then mindset. You can go back and look at the mental ones, and I go a little bit more in depth in the physical one as well. But it's beliefs, and we can change these. You can uncover your limiting beliefs, and then your neuroplasticity, and they all go together. I can enter anywhere. I can start working on neuroplasticity and run into a priming problem. I can start working on priming and run into a mindset problem. I can start working on mindset and run into a belief problem. So we keep going around, and then the middle is the physiology. So once you have all of that done as a pre-stimulus, now we have the stimulus, the reaction, response, decision, action, and then here is what we're talking about today. From here to here, from stimulus to reaction is a quarter second. From reaction to response is about a quarter of a second. And I get there by, you can look this up, the reaction time of the subconscious is a quarter of a second. The reaction time of the conscious mind is a half second. You can give or take. I separate the response from the decision, and I separate it from the decision to the action. My response could be, I need to address this and take this head on. My decision could be, I'm going to wait, cool off, and write out my notes before I confront it. And then the action could be following through and doing that. So that's why I separate them out. And as a leader, this often happens, right? You get bad news, and as leaders, we want bad news early. You get bad news, you have a reaction, oh my gosh, if you let that reaction be the response, what the employee sees is a frown and a twisted up face, they won't want to give you bad news early again. So we have to not let the response equal the reaction. We need that pause in between there. So we want to have a good response, not a reactive response. So now you have your response, and then the response leads to a decision. So back to the same situation. So the bad news is the stimulus. It's a redirect to deal with cognitive biases and limiting beliefs and meta programs and those things that happen here way before our consciousness is even aware. That's why it's so hard to change a habit. By the time the conscious mind is aware, it's already gone. So what we do is we condition that in at the reaction level. Then we have the reaction, and there's a pause. And this pause is not just pausing, right? Well, you're literally letting the conscious mind get on board and letting the conscious mind assess what's going on. So I don't want that response to happen as soon as the conscious mind is aware. I want it to look at what the subconscious is providing. It's an assessment. This is that first assessment. Then you get to a look at what's coming from the assessment. Now I can get into more detail here, but you can also train the subconscious to feed off that first step of problem solving, which is clearly define the problem. It won't do it clearly, but at least it can give you 3 versions. The subconscious, the network of neurons, processes at 11 million bits per second. So put that to your advantage. Use that so that it doesn't just give you off the reaction, it gives you the reaction. You can have a low-cost solution, a mid-cost solution, and an ideal solution. There's different ways you can have it hand off. So now you get to respond, and the respond is, I'm going to do it, which is now. I'm going to delay it later. I'm going to delegate it to somebody else, or I'm going to discard it. I'm going to dump it. So that could be your response is one of those. And depending on what it is, that leads to the action. So in the employee thing, the action might be, okay, I need to delay it, and I need to respond to them, and this is major, so I need to have a focused meeting on the topic. And then you can say to them, I want you to meet me in my office in 30 minutes at whatever time. Now that's the action. So that was the decision. The response was, I'm going to delay it. The decision was, I'm going to have them meet me in my office. And then the action is to follow through with what you thought. Now that sounds like it's really complicated. This here is a half a second. This here is another half a second. So all of this is happening inside of a second, but because we're doing it at the subconscious level, we're training it at the subconscious level where it processes 11 million bits per second, this changes your life, because those 33,000 stimulus response cycles we have a day, you're not going to be able to manage all of those. But when you change and become, and you're being that person, and then the last one is the emotional area, and that's what I've been talking about today. So when all else fails and you still get triggered, now we have to have an emotional modulation situation, and what we need to do is locate it, label it, learn from it, and allow it to pass through in that 90 seconds, and now you're back on track, and you didn't ruin the next 10,000 stimulus response cycles, which can often happen. This was this emotional area. I do not go into depth in the relationship, professional and financial, although in the professional area I have a lot of content out there. The business is dynamic leadership. This is more of my passion. It's the life expansion after 50 work. I don't do much in the relationship area, and I don't do much in financial. There's so much written there. There's so many experts in different points of view, but you do have to have agency and personal leadership. And so my focus is mental, physical, spiritual, emotional. And we do work with the relationship part. I help people reach their goals, but oftentimes I will hand that off and we'll find somebody who's uniquely qualified to do that. And doing that after you've done the be work, the becoming work, you're likely to find the right person, and you're likely to isolate what you really need. So it's like mental, physical, spiritual, emotional. We get that going, and once you're in that right place and you have the vision clarified and all, now you can pick, do I need somebody to work on the relationships? Is it more professional? Is it financial? Maybe it's all three. Which one am I going to do first? Next week I'll do another deep dive, the 7 fitness areas, and tie it together, an update that I'm going through right now with my 2-month experiment. Thanks for tuning in.